Welcome to the Women's News Indigenous Women Speak Out series, a series that tells of the originative work and lives of female leaders of Indigenous and First Nation communities in both the U.S. and Canada to spread light on their call for environmental advocacy, cultural preservation, and improving health and human services. These women have a uniquely valued place in Indigenous cultures that can help raise respect for women's special wisdom throughout the world. Join us.
Hello, everyone. My name is Mary Kim Titla. I'm a member of the San Carlos Apache tribe. I'm also the Executive Director for United National Indian Tribal Youth. I'd like to introduce myself in my language, the Apache language. She Mary Kim Titla Gonze, Tendo Jage and Shli Gayan Chin Bonchi. And I just told you that I am from the Tendo Jage clan, which is on my maternal side, and I'm Gayan Chin Bonchi, which is on my father's side, the paternal side, which is from the Camp Verde Band of Apaches. I'm very happy to be joining you and honored to be interviewing our guest. This is Madonna Thunderhawk, and I'm going to let her introduce herself. Hi, Madonna.
Hello, everyone. I'm very honored to be here. I'm an elder from the Cheyenne River Sioux tribe in South Dakota, north central area of the state. And this is my home.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time to be on this podcast. I am super excited to be talking to you because, to be quite honest, Madonna, you are a superstar, in my opinion. And you are truly a warrior woman. I think you are really somebody that people should know. And so we're going to jump right in and talk about a lot of the work that you've been involved in since the 1960s. And so why don't we just start with the American Indian movement, because you were a leader in that movement. So can you tell me a little bit about that and the occupation of Alcatraz?
Okay, the occupation of Alcatraz happened before my involvement with the American Indian movement. We had been out in the Bay Area on relocation and stuff, so we're kind of familiar with what was going on. And then relatives of mine, my uncle and several others, in 1964, they staked claim to Alcatraz Island when the federal government shut down the prison. And it was symbolic, they staked claim to it, and they said, according to our treaty provisions, any federal land that's decommissioned or not used should revert back to the original, indigenous landowners. That was the what happened then in 64. So then a few years later is when the actual occupation of Alcatraz took place in 69. So, but by that time I had come back home. I was back home by then, and we were working on the Black Hills issue, the uranium mining that was planned, and other mining, of course, the gold mining that was going on, and the whole issue of the taking of the Black Hills when Alcatraz Island happened. And while we were at the occupation on Mount Rushmore, we met with John Trudell, and he had come from Alcatraz. And he asked if we would come, myself and a couple other women, if we would come and help to establish, community there on the island for those that were permanent residents. So that's how I got to Alcatraz.
Well, thank you for that background. I appreciate it. There has been quite a few events over the years that you have been involved with, and the occupation of Alcatraz was just one of them. I believe you were part of the relocation program. Is that right?
Oh, yeah. We all were in those days. Yeah, it was a problem. It was, a program or a project of the federal government. It was an amazing for young people, go to the big city, go out, see the rest of the country, and it's just gonna be a wonderful thing. Well, we saw what was going on and we saw the real world, and we all mostly went home.
Well, you've been a part of Native American resistance, so to speak, since those early years. And I know that history books have not been kind to Native Americans, and there's probably, in terms of historical context, a lot of young people who really don't know much about that period of time. Do you find that to be true?
Oh yeah, definitely. It's just but I guess that's just a process, of uh, of our people, especially, I can only speak for my area, where I'm from and stuff, but because we are colonized, we still have that mentality, of I don't know, white is right. A lot of people won't admit that, but here we had a chance with our tribal colleges to just turn this thing upside down, and we haven't. Because what? We're waiting for someone else to say, well, go ahead and write your own history. What? Curriculum is so important. And there's individually, I know there's individual Indian organizations, educational organizations around the country that are doing just that, but it's not on a consistent basis nationwide. Even in South Dakota here, we don't have a standard curriculum for Indian studies, for example. And Indian studies, shouldn't even be Indian studies. It should just be flat the curriculum, and that our history should be the curriculum, but it's not. So we have a long way to go yet, and but it isn't because of the lack of trying, I don't think, because we are who we are, and most of us are land-based, and that we have so many issues and so many crises going on continually. How do you prioritize? Save the children, save the education, save the water, save the land. I mean, it's really difficult, and I've seen that over the decades. I've seen that we're constantly in crisis. So it's difficult to prioritize, in other words.
Well, I know you've been very busy all these years, and your activism, I know that the word activist is an overused word, but your work has touched on many topics related to, of course, the environment, land, and water. But getting back to the topic of education, you decided that a government-run school wasn't always the best thing for Native children. So you started a survivor school. Can you talk about that?
Well, at that time, that was in the early 70s, excuse me. And it was a time when there was so many, things going on. We were just constantly on the move. The American Indian movement, the key word was movement. We had a core group of our people that traveled. They wanted us on every reservation. They wanted us to come, and they wanted to tell us their story, what was going on. And so we were just constantly on the move. And I had my children with me. And well, we were a movement of families, that we were all doing that. It wasn't just, select few. We were all, that's how it was. And my son said, Mom, I think, we should have our own school. He said, I don't want to go to the school, off the reservation. I don't want to go to the school on the reservation because we're just going to end up in fights. People fighting for, we have long hair and, we're AIM and that type of thing. So I looked around, and there was a lot of families that were indicted, because of Wounded Knee. They had charges. And so there were children that would come to the legal office, and then we had what we called an AIM house where people could sleep and stay there while they were waiting for their hearings or their court hearing. So there was a lot of children around. I realized, well, yeah, okay, what should we do? So we started, it wasn't really a school, it was more like a group home. And we started basically, I mean, I wasn't into education. I wasn't, educator. I didn't know, we just kind of played it by ear, and we took our direction from the children. And it just grew on us, pretty soon we had a whole lot of kids. And so we had a chance to develop curriculum. We had a chance to actually sit down and think about it and say, hey, this is an opportunity, let's do this, but that was a sign of the times then, that type, we could never do that again, because our young people of all ages, from practically toddlers up to, young adults, 19, 20-year-olds, most of them were bilingual. English was their second language, but it's totally different now. It's not like that. English is everybody's first language. So there's a lot of, differences, some subtle and some major. We didn't have the dysfunction in communities like we have nowadays. We didn't have the terrible drug, scourge that's going on nowadays. We didn't have those kinds of social ills, I mean, there was some going on, of course, but it wasn't so prominent. But yeah, that's what we did. We had our chance to not only teach but learn our own. We learned right along with them. What, for example, what's in your world? What in those days? Hey, food stamps. What is that? What does that mean? Well, let's go find out. So we went and researched what that was. We wanted what was real in these kids' world, their life, their lifestyle. What was all of that about, and what does it all mean? So we did things like that, and when people we knew that they had a court date, we went to court. So the kids learned that, there's more to just the police chase you around or arrest people because they're drunk. There's more to this legal system than we know. So we had to find out so that these children would know, here's what you're going to be faced with as you get older and you're an adult. We're feeding this system. We're feeding the prison system. It's got to stop, or at least slow it down. So that's what we taught our young people.
So the school, it sounds to me like it was amazing, and there was a lot of culturally relevant teachings. It sounds like you talked about things like sovereignty and had real discussions about real tribal issues.
Oh yeah, and the first thing they did was learn the 1868 treaty inside and out. That was one of the requirements you had to do for the older ones, and then they helped the younger ones and taught them. So yeah, those are the things we did.
I understand that you've long been an advocate for Native children. I know that you're a mother, you mentioned that, a grandmother, and now I believe a great-grandmother, correct?
Yeah, yes. 5 great-granddaughters.
That's amazing. Congratulations. So this advocacy work is super important to you. And when you were talking about, the foster care system, the work that you're doing now falls right in line with an organization and their work. And what I'm talking about is the Simply Smiles project and the Children's Village. So you got to know this group, and now tell us what's happening on the Cheyenne River Sioux Reservation.
Oh man, I just can't. I'm so happy that I lived long enough to see it. I never thought it could or would happen, you know? Uh, we got to talking with them, with this group. They had started coming to our reservation, to a community right down the road here, and they come every summer, and all they would do was to have day camp, and that's all they did. Their only agenda was to have fun and activities with the children. No religion, no anything else, you know, just pure, we're here to, you know, have activities and fun. So we got acquainted with them. My daughter actually did. She's a nutritionist and she's into traditional foods and organic gardening and that type of thing. So she saw that they were, you know, growing food there and stuff. So she got acquainted with them. So then she started talking with them, and then they came over to visit us. Came over to my house, and we started talking about child welfare issues. And man, and you know, it was just amazing because they said, well, you know, what do you think, we're willing to help? What do you think, you know, we can do? What, you know, what could... So I said, are you kidding? Sit down. Sit down and listen. So several of us other grandmothers, we got to get visit with them, and we said, we got to have some kind of a something that's set up so that our kids will not have to leave the reservation for foster care. That's where, you know, that's we got to try to put a stop to that. There are foster care on the reservation, but there's not enough. And they're overwhelmed, the ones they do have. There isn't a lot. So what we said was, we started talking and just thinking about it, and we said, what if we had a children's village where we work directly with the tribal court, and these children can come to our village and they can stay there. And that'll always be their home. They can go home when it's time if they want to, but they can always come back. They never age out, so that they won't have to leave the reservation. They won't have to go to a non-native foster home and be put on meds to keep them docile, you know, so they won't run away. That's the thing that happens when our children get into the system. They dope them up so they won't run away. They won't run home. So we're hoping that right now, and then COVID happened just when we got going. COVID happened, but we went ahead anyway. We've got 2 homes built now, and we're working on the third, and a community, you know, building. I mean, for offices and therapy, you know, that type of thing. So we've got the 2 homes built, and we're working on recruiting. Hopefully, what we want to do is to help recruit young people, or anybody, any family or person that wants to be a professional kinship parent, not just a glorified daycare. You know, we want professional, and we want to help train them, you know, teach them to so that they're permanent employees, so that these homes have kinship parents rather than foster parents.
The Indian Child Welfare Act, ICWA, as you know, became law in 1978. And 25 to 35% of all Native American children at that time were being taken from their homes, and 85% of them were placed outside their communities. But since the law's enactment, the number of Native children placed in non-Native homes fell to 56% of those removed from their families. So the work that you're doing and the work that others are doing to keep these children in their communities is making a difference. And you can see the numbers changing. And that's the goal.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yes. It's a long road, but, you know, it's hard work, but it's got to be done. That's our future.
Absolutely.
You know.
And you personally know, like, to be taken from your home and to be placed in a boarding school. I understand that you and your sister, I think, were placed in a boarding school. What was that experience?
Well, it was just a common occurrence back when this was right after World War II. This is in 1946. A bus pulled up and my grandmother walked with my sister and I, and we got on the bus and we went, and we had no idea. We had no idea. And we got there, and it was traumatizing for everybody, but you're little and you don't know. I mean, we didn't know, but it was like it was a whole herd of us, and we got off the bus and they lined us up first thing, and everybody was dead quiet. There was no crying, there was no fussing, there was nothing. You were just in that after that, that's how it was. You were just, nobody talked, nobody did anything. And we eventually developed our own sign language, but that's another story. But they kept the first graders, okay? We kept us separate from the second graders and the third graders and anybody else, because you stayed in the first grade until you learned English. So they didn't want you communicating with anybody else, because in the second grade, you knew enough English to get by, but you could still talk Indian to your sister or your brother. So they kept you separated. So, but the thing was, I knew English. My grandmother, my maternal grandmother, I remember her saying when I was a little girl, she said, "It's a white man's world, and my grandchildren aren't going to be handicapped. They're going to know English." So it was the other way around for me. I had a working knowledge of Lakota. I could speak, I couldn't speak it fluently, but I had a working, knowledge of it. But English I knew. So I think it started for me then because I knew what was going on and I told everybody. And I was always kind of like, okay, guys, listen up. Here's what's going to happen, So I believe it kind of started then to be kind of like, I don't know, mother hen, So, but it was a experience, but I think because there's strength in numbers, I think the trauma was there, but it was kind of like, well, we're all in the same boat, But my mother was working in the war effort, So she was still working in the shipyards in California while we were in the boarding school that first year. But when she came back, she became the dormitory attendant for that boarding school. So then we were, we still were there, but we were with her. But my mother was raised in the boarding school system in the 30s. So she was in grade school when our people were still under the War Department. So when she went to school, in grade school, she wore uniforms. And it was like military. And if they ran away or if they did anything wrong, they were flogged. She watched. They made all the children watch them when they flogged those that tried to run away. So when she got into high school, then they had the Indian Reorganization Act of 1935, 34, 35. So that's when she was in high school. Then it was an about change. It just did a, turnaround. And that's where she learned to do things like play tennis, things like that after, the 30s. But she had been in boarding school her whole life. So she taught us So when I went to boarding school, it wasn't that different from home because my mother was strict. We cleaned, and we cleaned on our hands and knees. It wasn't clean unless you scrubbed it, you know? And that was my mother because she was raised that way. She had no parenting skills, you know? And that's what's handed down generation to generation, you know? And so it was really hard for me, you know? I tried to be different, you know, than not do that and stuff. But I was strict with my kids, you know. And now my daughter's, she broke that cycle, you know. She's, you know, my kids are more loving with their children. I'm so glad. That was, you know, but that's our history, you know. That's how we were, what was done to us as a people.
How do you feel
So yeah,
the repatriation and all of the stories that we're seeing now of the mass graves at residential schools and boarding schools? Many of these children are returning home. How does that affect you?
well, you know, personally, I can only speak for myself, but personally, you know, it's right away for me, it was anger because we know this all along. It was handed down to us. Even the schools here in South Dakota, we know the stories that we heard when we were in school, and then what we heard later of children that died and children that just disappeared. But nothing was ever done. The issue was never brought up. By who? Tribal council? By the Catholic school? By who? You know? So those kinds of the issue to me was just like, well, we've always known it was there. We always know, we knew that, know that. And to me, you know, I'm not like, oh, you know, my first reaction was not sadness or anything, it was anger. You know, it's about time it took you this long, you know, and it had to happen in Canada before it happened here, the cover up, you know. And what, these are Catholic schools, most of them, you know, and where we haven't heard a word, anything from anybody from the Vatican or anywhere else, you know. And then the residential schools that were with the government, you know, nothing there yet, nothing said. Focus is, oh well, you know, just, oh well, how sad, and oh, they found the graves and stuff. But now what? You know, now what?
The international attention it received was something to see. That's how I kept tabs on it, by just, you know, not only the news channels, because, you know, what they did was very limited, but the social media aspect of it, there was something daily that was shared. And to me, the social media, you know, people who were recording and going live, that was exciting to see. And I'm sure that with technology and just how that's evolved over time, something you didn't have back in the 60s. So
Yeah.
there was something different this time around with social media.
Oh, it was amazing. I loved it. Oh my gosh. We were camped up on the hill, the only hill that was there, you know, in the camp, and they called it Facebook Hill because that's where you had to go and hold your phone up, you know, to get coverage. So everybody would go up on the hill to do that, you know, and that's where the media tent was, and that's where the legal tent was. So anybody that came in had to come right by our camp, you know, so we got to meet and greet everybody. And we were elders, you know, so we let everybody know that we're here to support. So we didn't need to be down on the microphone in the, you know, we didn't need to be, doing that type of thing. We needed to just be visible and let people know that we're supporting. But and then if anybody asked for advice or wanted to, like sometimes the legal, people would come over, and we'd go over and, meet with them for advice and things like that. But yeah, it was such an amazing happening. It was just international phenomenon.
It certainly was. I'm going to fast forward now to earlier this year. And I am curious as to your first reaction when you heard that Deb Haaland from New Mexico was nominated to the Secretary of the Interior, and then that whole process. Did you ever think in your lifetime that you would live to see such a thing?
No, I didn't. And I'm old school. I'm so skeptical, that when she was nominated, I thought, oh, the fight's on, the resistance, I figured was going to come from everybody, Here she is, beautiful Native woman with her brains. But of course, they're going to let her get in there, because everything we've ever had to do has been a major battle, a major fight. We've had to just settle for getting our foot in the door and then keep pushing and pushing, So when she was, appointed, I couldn't quit smiling. I thought I lived to see it. I was so happy. And I thought of my grandma, thought of my mom. Just amazing.
Well, you have definitely been the example. And I know there are lots of articles and even documentaries about your life. So if anyone is watching and they want to learn more about Madonna Thunderhawk, all you have to do is Google her name and all sorts of things pop up. Lots of lifetime worth of work, and it's very commendable. Madonna, I am amazed at all the things that you've accomplished and that you've done, and you're still at it. I don't know if you want to share your age, but I hope that I'm as big as you are when I'm your age.
Yeah, well, I'm 81 and I'm proud of it. I'm still here. I mean, this is what 81 does, This is what our ancestors did. 81 was, to them, there was still, things to do, life to live. So, yeah, I'm still here.
That's what I'm hearing. So keep at it. Keep up the great work. Thank you so much for sharing your insight, sharing your advice, and for, again, being that advocate, being on the front lines for all these Native causes. I appreciate you. Thank you. In Apache, we say ahia, thank you. Thank you. Ahia ashon.
Thank you. I'm so glad I got to be talking with you.
We'll stay in touch.
Okay. Take care.
Yeah.
Thank you for joining this edition of the Women's News Indigenous Women Speak Out series. I'm Dr. Lori Sokol, Executive Director of Women's News. To learn more, please visit us at women'snews.org and follow us at Women's News on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. And please subscribe to this podcast.